Hello, everybody. I'm Susan Heaton-Wright, and I'm delighted to have Professor Paddy Ross, who's an associate professor of psychology from Durham University. Now, he is researching how children perceive social signals, particularly interested in facial recognition, body language, and gestures. And those people who know the work that I do know that I am very much pushing on non-verbal communication as well as what we say to make a positive impact. Now, his current projects involve the phenomenon, I can't even say phenomenon, an auditory emotional dominance in children when they can't ignore what they hear. And my question with this is, if you're in a noisy classroom, is that going to impact learning? Yeah. And also how individuals with autism spectrum disorder recognize emotions from the hands. So welcome, Paddy.
Very
Am
nice
I
to be
allowed to
here.
call you Paddy
Feature.
rather than Dr. Ross?
Oh God, yes, absolutely.
And the reason I reached out to you is because I'm a Durham alumna, and in the feed from LinkedIn, it said that you'd done some research about how people read emotions when other people are wearing masks. So
That's
could
right.
you tell me a little bit more about that?
Sure. So again, thanks very much for having me, and thanks everyone who's joined in. So that research stemmed obviously out of COVID, where masks became pretty ubiquitous in the West. And there was a few studies that came out that basically tried to say this is going to be terrible. People aren't going to be able to recognize anyone's emotions. It's going to be a breakdown of social interaction. It's going to be awful. The nature, though, of sort of studies in psychology tend to be lab based and very controlled. And the way people will look at facial emotion is just to show the face and just
Yeah.
pictures of a face, and they'll mask it. They'll take the mask off. They'll compare results. What we looked at was it's not really how you see people in real life. You don't just see their heads, unless, of course, you're on a StreamYard stream and you are looking at their heads. But thankfully, we don't need to be masked when you're online, right? So you tend to see everyone's whole body most of the time. So what we did was we did an experiment where we took emotional bodies, so people posing in emotional ways, being angry or fearful or sad or happy. We basically showed them to people and said, what's the emotion here? Then we had photoshopped on masks. A great undergrad student of mine had photoshopped all these masks onto these photos. And basically what you do is you show people those ones as well, and you get them to recognize the emotions. This was maybe a bit tongue-in-cheek on my part, because I kind of knew that it's not going to make much difference whether you mask when you've got the full body, because the body is such an important conduit for emotion recognition. We don't. A lot of research focuses on the face because it's very salient, right? And everyone recognizes a smile or a frown or whatever. What they don't sort of think about so much is actually what they're doing with their body and what they're doing with their hands and the signals those are sending off all the time. It's maybe picked up in the periphery of people when they're looking at a face. Their body, they're maybe not focusing on it so much, unless we'll talk a little bit about people with autism spectrum disorder a little later on. That might be slightly different. But what we found was that it doesn't make any difference for for sadness, for fear, or for anger. But we did see a little drop off in happiness.
Oh, that's interesting.
So the ability to recognize happiness.
So do you think if people were, thinking about in the field rather than in the lab, if people were to make sure that they use their eyes more in that situation to show that they were happy?
To certainly, well, if not their eyes, their body or their
Yes.
voice. So again,
Yes.
here we're showing pictures of people, with these things to make it more controlled.
Yes.
It's a trade-off, right? You either make your experiment very controlled, in which case you lose what we call ecological validity, which is the ability to apply it to the real world, or you increase the ecological validity and then you lose controllability. So it becomes a bit, there's lots of different elements then that you can't control
Yes.
anymore. The thing we don't have there is that all of these images are sort of people with their arms outstretched as if they've just, seen a long lost friend at a train station or something, and they're very happy to see them. It's actually fairly ambiguous. If all of the happy people were standing like this with their thumbs up,
yeah.
then you might find that actually having a mask on or off makes no difference at all. People can still tell that emotion. And obviously you touched on the voice there as well, or I did.
Yes.
Again, it's a thing it's unusual for us to think about the tone of our voice, because you don't really hear your own voice the way other people hear it. You'll know that awful thing where you hear this back in a recording and you don't sound at all like you think you did.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard, and people don't tend to think about how they're talking, I don't think. Not consciously anyway. They don't make a conscious effort to. But if you're wearing a mask, that's incredibly important.
That's
especially
really
if you're trying to portray happiness, is to try to do it with your body and your voice. Because people do smile with their eyes, right? You can tell, usually when someone's smiling, but the mouth is the key conveyor of a smile, obviously. And when that's taken away, it does make things rather more ambiguous if you don't have access to the voice or the body.
That's so interesting on a couple of parts. One thing is that with my own methodology, superstar communicator, voice is the last part. And I often ask people when their voice changes. Is it when they're frightened? Is it when they're happy? Is it when they're excited? And to start consciously being aware of that, so that they can modify that if necessary, because it might be ambiguous. I hope I'm on the right.
It's very important. I mean, the work you said at the start there about the auditory dominance stuff, where children can't ignore what they hear, is all about that. So
Right.
That's this phenomenon where if you show kids, let's say, fearful bodies, someone cowering in fear with their hands up, and you say, what's the emotion in this body? But you play them someone laughing, someone being happy, and you say, ignore that. Just tell us what the emotion is that you see. Kids are dreadful at that. They will say that person cowering in fear is happy.
Right.
So they find it very, very hard to ignore or not take on board what they're hearing to such an extent that it actually is detrimental to the recognition of what they're seeing. It's one of the reasons I wonder when you're talking to children, when you've sort of reached the end of your tether and you really start still smiling but talking through your teeth and you sound really angry, your child will just cry anyway, because despite your best efforts with your body and your face, the voice is giving you away. And
that's amazing. So in fact, it's overriding non-verbal communication.
Yes, we think so.
Wow.
We've recently just submitted a paper where instead of emotional voices, we had emotional music. So
Right.
violins and clarinets, sounding little happy trills and little sort of sad diminuendos and things. And it works as well, which is really interesting. So it means that, you mentioned classrooms earlier. It means that any negative oral environment might actually impact a child's perception of what they're looking at. So you think of everyone who's working from home over COVID. If that's a negative home environment, there's arguments, there's siblings running around, there's general negativity, anger in the house. That could directly impact then how the kid is, or how the child is viewing someone on a screen, their teacher on the screen, for instance. The teacher could be very smiley and looking very, proper and inviting and nice and welcoming, like a primary school teacher. But if that's not what they're hearing, that might actually override their perception of what they're seeing.
That's amazing. I'm sure you need to push that out to education trusts, because that's invaluable information for them.
It really would be. It would be. We're looking as well at emotional stories, and whether that old sort of adage, "It's not what you said, it's how you said it."
Yeah.
Whether actually reading, for instance, to children in a, let's say you read, Mr. Happy had the best day ever. Would the child think Mr. Happy is actually sad, despite the content of the story being that he's happy, despite the picture being Mr. Happy at his happiest? It might do. We're gonna find out
Very
this year, hopefully.
And when does that change? Have you seen, is there a particular time? Is it adolescence that then we have a more adult way of responding to these messages?
Yeah, very much up in the air. The original work was a very simple experiment where if you see a flash, you hit a button, and if you hear a beep, you hit a different button. And then what happened was the experimenter accidentally, on purpose, presented them both at the same time and said, "Oh, whoops, that was a mistake. What was the stimuli?" And adults will hit the button for the flash, whereas children will hit the button for the beep. So they seem to have this just general tendency. So some work has been done to try to chart what we call the developmental trajectory, just basically the way kids develop in various abilities. Some researchers had said it was around about 7 or 8. And there's other work that says that you actually go through a little mini pubertal sort of hormonal change at about 7 or 8 years old. We find for some stimuli, it was about 7 or 8. The older kids didn't show. So we had kids from 5 to 7 and then from 8 to 11. Didn't show. So the 8 to 11-year-olds didn't show for some. For others, though, both sets of children were right down, only getting 20% accuracy, all the way up to 11. So it looks like it might kick on into adolescence. We did some work 5 or 6 years ago trying to chart again the developmental trajectory of just the ability to recognize emotions in non-language vocalization. So laughing and crying and grr and screams and things. And we found that kids actually weren't adult-like until about 14 in that. It differs emotion to emotion, and actually girls are always better than boys for whatever reason. But it seemed to be about 14. So ideally, well, in an ideal world, you have lots and lots of children ranging from 5 to 18, and you have this lovely continuous, trajectory. In reality, getting that many kids for that to work logistically is extremely challenging. And so that's why we kind of have to bin them, we call it, into these little age groups, which isn't ideal because, you could have a very old 7-year-old and a very young 8-year-old who are only separated by a couple of months, and all of a sudden you've split them.
Yes.
But for want of a better way, it's a tidy way of doing things. So yeah, jury's still out on where it changes. We just know it does change. Adults tend to have a visual dominance. Another thing that could stem from is that there could be an evolutionary reason for that, where when you are 3 foot tall, being able to hear threat before you see it is much more useful to you. Whereas when you become a protector or an adult in a group, being able to see something from far away before you can hear it may well be far more useful to you.
Really, really good point. Now, I don't know if anybody's on watching live, but if you've got any questions at all or wish to say hello, we really welcome you. But I have had some questions from other people who aren't able to attend live. And I know that you mentioned about the work that you're doing with autistic children. And I was wondering how they recognize emotions. Can you teach it? And does it involve hand signals?
Yes. So we had a paper out 2 years ago, me and a colleague, Tessa Flack, which looked at the hands, basically. And this was just with neurotypical participants. We call anyone that isn't, doesn't have a socio-emotional disorder or isn't neurodivergent. So with neurotypicals, when you remove the hands from emotional poses, it seems to make a difference or we find a difference for fear and for anger, but not for sadness or happiness. And it's basically in emotions where the hands are being used for something. So they're being used for shields, in fear, or weapons in anger, or things like that. We also know that people, the neurodivergent populations, or people with autism, have particular trouble with facial emotional recognition.
Yes.
Eye tracking tells us that they tend to just not look at the areas which we would automatically look at. So mouth for anger, or sorry, mouth for happiness, or eyes for fear, or the middle of the brow for anger, like a furrowed brow, and tend to look all over the face, really. How that works with the body, we don't actually know a great deal about, because research for a long time has treated the body as just one whole thing and not individual parts. So, shoulders up or down or backwards or leaning forwards, certainly not hand position or form.
Ooh,
And the body's very complex. It's
yes.
I mean, if you have fists up here, you look angry. If you have fists above your head, you look jubilant, like you've just
Yes.
jumped for joy. You imagine winning like a tennis match or something. Everyone looks very angry when they win a tennis match. If you take still images from a newspaper, everyone's screaming and shouting, and actually they're incredibly happy. Um, so this year I have a brilliant group of 4 undergraduate students who are going to look at exactly this, who are going to basically replicate that hand study where we took the hands out and tested the emotion recognition, but with an ASD, an autism spectrum disorder
Yes.
population, and neurotypicals. And to be honest, we don't actually know what will happen. It could be that taking the hands out makes it much harder for the ASD group, because it's the sole real communicator of fear or of anger. It could be that it doesn't make too much difference. And it could be that could be the case because of the same reason that we see in the face, that they're just not looking really at the right bits for
Yes.
long enough to detect the emotional content. Um, it's going to be very interesting either way, and it'll be something that we'll be able then to apply. So
Yes.
if we do find that actually the hands are even more important for this population, maybe because they don't tend to look at the face as efficiently, and they tend to look at the body more, perhaps. In that case, that's something then we can tell people who
Wow.
are communicating or wanting to communicate better with ASD populations, to really try to emote with your hands far more, which may make it far easier for someone with ASD or any socio-emotional disorder, I suppose, to detect how you're actually feeling.
That could be groundbreaking, couldn't it?
That could be, yeah. I mean,
Could
it's
be a
again,
real game changer.
it's so under researched. It really is. That it could be, yeah. It really could be. It could change sort of how we advise people to
Yes.
communicate, and in the end of the day, being able to communicate more effectively and efficiently with people who find it hard to communicate is sort of the name of the game.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned about different parts of the body. I found that very interesting because when I was training to be an opera singer, we did mask work, which covered the entire face to
Hmm.
think about what we did non-verbally and
Mhm.
vocally, although it was difficult with a mask. So that is very interesting. So within the theatrical, the performance world, there
Mhm.
is work on that. Um, but I've got a message from Greg Williams, who's a body language expert, and he asks something very specific. What do shoulder shrugs indicate when someone's voice tonality is excited, sad, or neutral?
So it's a fairly specific question on, if I'm thinking about, just as you were asking it there, I was thinking about being excited and being sad and being nothing, I suppose. And I guess the main thing that you think of certainly is height, I guess. If you're excited, you tense your shoulders and you're really, really excited. If you're sad, you tend to slump and your whole head slumps. If you're neutral, I suppose you're in the middle, if you want. Now, whether those by themselves can indicate the emotion someone's feeling, So if you don't hear or see a face, for instance, could you tell if my shoulders are down there or up here, how I'm actually feeling? Maybe, maybe not. But I think you might be hard pressed to find someone who's sad and trying to portray it with their body that doesn't have slump shoulders, or that's excited. And I know, thinking about my daughter, when she gets excited about something, she'll tense up and be really, her shoulders will go up. It's an interesting question, but I don't know whether the shoulders themselves indicate those emotions. I think rather the flip, that you'd be hard pressed to see those emotions portrayed in someone where you don't have those particular high, low, mid shoulder positions.
I'm thinking from a vocal point of view that if you're slumped like that, it slightly alters the vocal tone, and
Mm-hmm.
that because you're restricting your larynx movement, that might change, another subconscious or
Yeah,
another non-verbal message that people
yeah.
could pick up.
Well, it's interesting. The little noise I did when I was sort of pretending to be my daughter there was a very high pitched sort of eep,
Yes,
and
because it
it's there's something in that where if you're excited, you're up, your voice does go higher as you get more excited. When you're sad, you're literally down, you're
yes,
slumped, and your voice is lower. And it's there's definitely something in that, sort of, even the semantics of that, of being up and being high and being down and being low. Literally, all those words mean sad, and all those other words mean
yeah,
excited and elated.
yes.
There's certainly something in that. I'm sorry if that didn't answer that question. I
Well,
sort of went a
I
bit of a
think
roundabout way there.
we added some things. I'm sure that Greg will have some things to go away with and think about from
He's
that.
very welcome to email me and ask away anything
Yes.
like that.
Now, we talked a little bit about gestures and things like that.
Mm.
You know, and I know that there are some cultures where gestures, hand expressions, hand movements are very, very important. I am not going to be racist in any way, but the Sicilian population in
Mm-hmm.
southern Italy, they have their own non-verbal gesture language. It's
Yeah.
well known. So, what cultural differences are there with gestures other than the obvious ones?
It's it's interesting how these things start, isn't it? There is that stereotype of Sicilian, even Italian,
Oh,
very hand gestury, if to kind of coin a phrase.
yeah,
Um, Now, whether is that for emphasis because of the language, potentially, there's obviously some cultural, so like a shared cultural meaning behind it. I'd love to ask someone who does social history if this was a thing that dates back hundreds, thousands years. Is it a Roman thing? Is it a
fascinating.
Latin language thing? I would be thrilled to find out. I know that for us, we actually tend to talk with our hands more than we realize we do. We tend to very much open out our hands, especially if we're up in front of people. You need to give your hands something to do. A lot of the time, I've sort of been sat here, even just talking now, and my hands touch my face and they're all over the place. You do tend to use your hands more than you think, maybe just not as overtly openly as like, put it this way, when people really use their hands like I did there, you really notice it, so it sticks in your head. When people use it the same way that you're used to seeing it, I might talk like this, and at this and that, and you'll point different directions. Is that emotive, or is it emphasizing the thing that you're talking about? If I'm saying, oh, there's a few things, and this is me essentially juggling a few things, or is it this,
Yeah.
or is it that? and I'm sort of physically holding then this and that and weighing up two options literally with my hands. Can you do that? I mean, you can do it, I suppose, in an angry way. You could do it in a happy way. I wonder if you would emote with your hands like that with language in a sad or fearful way. I'm trying to think if I've done that. Certainly not consciously. I suppose you don't tend to do any of this stuff consciously.
No, I wonder if the energy goes down.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah.
And you're using your facial expressions as well to demonstrate that.
Yeah. I mean, the cultural stuff's it's so interesting, especially because we don't tend to take it into account. These stimuli, for instance, that we're using are posed stimuli from the Netherlands. So mostly, presumably, again, it's a university, so it might be, people from all over the place. Presumably mostly Dutch. Is that different if we then test those emotions on, Durham undergraduate students who, again, are majority English, but, only just. Plenty of East Asian students, lots of European students. Is that a problem? Maybe,
yes. And in the same way, there are different facial expressions, aren't there? You know that there might be somebody speaking, and I might think, being English, that an expression or a sort of facial gesture, for want of a better word, I might think, oh goodness, they're being rude, when in fact it's part of the way that they speak.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we know that there is what's called an own race bias for recognition. You will recognize emotions better from people of your own general ethnic race. How far, though, that goes down, I imagine that's a very broad term that actually could be brought down even much, much further than that. So, for instance, people from, America will be more pronounced, but quite similar to Ireland, England. People from Eastern Europe into the Middle East, will they be the same, or will you be able to detect the emotions that they show with the same accuracy as you can people from your own country? I'd argue not. I don't think so. And certainly then, when you go to East Asian countries, they tend to actually emote quite differently. There's much more emphasis on the eyes than there is the mouth. It's one of the reasons anime comics and animation have tiny mouths and massive eyes, because happiness and fear and all those great Studio Ghibli films, most of the emotion is nose up.
Amazing. I'm going to look out for that. Oh, we've got a couple of comments from Corinne. In listening, we see people with a very connective way of listening, using their hands more often than people who love listening to facts and figures. Do you recognize that? Facts and data, she corrected herself.
So we see people with a very connective way of listening using their hands more often than people who love listening to facts and data. So does that mean sort of in a more connecting with things on an emotional level, perhaps, instead of sort of the raw, the here are the facts and the.
So, Corinne, if you want to explain that more, the way that I'm reading this is that if you bring emotion into it, that people are going to remember that more than facts and data.
And certainly they're going to use their hands more because there's an emotional side to it. I think is that maybe what Corinne's asking? I mean, that would sit very nicely with my experience of listening to people who are, interested in what you have to say, compared to people who are just there to hear the results of a talk and just want the numbers, and they're going to make their own mind up, rather than someone who's invested, say, in a conversation about facts and data.
And do you think, therefore, that those people that are being more emotional with their non-verbal communication, they're going to have that connection? Is that going to help with the trust element?
There are more emotion on there. I mean, certainly, I would have thought so. I mean, there's a fairly good correlation between, trust and openness. Say,
Right.
I mean, they're nearly synonyms, right? So for someone who is literally open with their body language and their hands, and are facing you and are articulating, gesticulating with their hands, will look more open, will be less dominant and more trustworthy most of the time.
That's interesting. So
I mean,
Colleen says connective means focused on the other.
I think certainly then in that case. So focused on the other way of listening, using their hands more often than people who love listening to facts and data. I mean, it's one of those people then are listening and it's nearly a communication exercise, and the other people seem to be listening, but they're just listening to find out the stuff. It's not a two-way communication. So in that case, absolutely. If it's some kind of focused on the other communication that someone's doing, I would say certainly that's where you're going to automatically end up using your hands more. I would absolutely recognize that.
Brilliant.
Thanks
Now
for the
I've got one more question, and that's related to people wearing glasses. I wear glasses when I'm on screen.
Mhm.
Based on the work that you've done, particularly with children, are there things that spec wearers should think about to make sure that they are showing emotion?
I've got good news for spec wearers. It doesn't matter too much at all having specs on. If anything, it actually highlights your eyes. It
Okay.
directs attention, if anything, to your eyes compared to the rest of you. With children, it's interesting with children because what we find is that the ability to recognize emotions in the body comes quite early in kids. They're adult-like in that ability at about 8 years old. We tend to find faces later, voice later. So I mean, part of this is that actually you're 3 foot tall, right? When you're 5 years old, your main interaction with other people is the body of your parents and the hands of your parents, right? Unless you get down to their level, they're actually looking at your face from a very funny angle a lot of the time, or from across a room. To go back to your question, sorry about glasses, you are as emotive as I'm able to be with your face. There's nothing special handily that you'd need to do. Sometimes I wonder whether you ask children, do you remember if that person wore glasses or not?
No.
No.
They won't.
It'd be interesting though. I mean, I've seen work with sunglasses. I've seen work with different types of headscarf covering various bits of the face.
Yeah.
And obviously my mask study that you mentioned earlier. The good thing about glasses, they don't cover very much of the face. And as I said, they frame, I mean, it's a third of the, maybe somewhere between a third and 50% of the population wear glasses. So it's not like it's an unusual thing as well for children to see. I wear contacts. My wife wears glasses. Our daughter will probably soon be wearing glasses in that case.
Oh.
But no, it's not something people need to worry about, which is nice.
Okay.
That's a nice answer I can give, I suppose.
Now, I'm aware that you're a very, very busy man, Dr. Ross. I don't know if there are any other questions, but I know that you have said that people can contact you directly.
Absolutely.
And I will leave, if you don't mind, your email in the stream, just in case people want to contact you directly to ask questions.
Absolutely.
Are there any more questions here? Because I know we've covered a huge amount here. And there is an awful lot that we can take on board for our everyday communication with clients, with colleagues, with family members, with friends. Is there anything else you want to add before we finish, Paddy?
Just thanks very much for having me. This has been marvelous. I mean, the thing with academics is they love talking about their own stuff. So apologies if I sort of went a bit wayward and chatted around things or whatever, but it's very rare you get an opportunity just to talk about your own research. I find it very interesting.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure and an honor to interview you. And I wish you well for all of the work that you're doing.
Thank you very much. Maybe after this this ASD hand work gets finished, I can come back and chat to you and let you know what the results were.
This is really, really useful, particularly if we might be working with people in our team who find this challenging, and if there are ways that people can lead or communicate and to help everybody, that's a really good thing. There's a couple of things they've come. Jane says, we work with a huge number of students affected by trauma and can be mute at times. How can we support? Jacqueline says, thank you very much. And Jane says, great session, thanks so much. Do you have time to ask Jane's question? She's an amazing lady who has a charity in Hertfordshire, and she goes into schools with multinational companies, and I've done some work with them as well. And to prepare children for working and getting jobs.
Right.
So the question was, we work with a huge number of students affected by trauma and can be mute at times. How do we support?
I mean, it's
a
hell of a tough question. I have certainly no expertise working with students with trauma. It will depend on whether, being mute but not communicating at all, I suppose, are two different things. And being mute doesn't necessarily mean that they don't understand everything that I guess you're trying to communicate as well. So it depends where the support's needed. Is it an understanding what the student is trying to convey, or is it trying to convey what you feel or want to say to the students? I appreciate this isn't the best forum to have a back and forth conversation about that, but it depends.
Shall I introduce?
That'd be super. I mean, it's again, I don't want to give, because it's not my area, I wouldn't want to say the wrong thing and give bad advice.
Would you mind if I introduce you to Jane? So she did have a question.
Absolutely.
Because the work she's doing is so amazing.
That sounds really interesting. I'd be really glad to.
Okay. So I know that you've got to get back to looking after your 4-month-old baby.
Yeah, she'll be coming back from her walk just in a second.
Oh, thank you so much. And as I said before, I will leave Paddy's email address if anyone wants to get in contact with him. And we will have, I'm sure I'm going to invite Paddy back because this would be brilliant.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much. And thank you very much, all of those people who've been listening. I think everybody's been in awe of you, so haven't asked questions.
God, you do me a disservice.
Not like lectures with undergraduates.
No, you get no love there.
So until next time, thank you very much for watching. And this is Superstar Communicator with Susan Heaton-Wright interviewing Paddy Ross. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Thank you.